Hello, I'm John Campbell, a level two molecular hydrogen consultant, a graduate of the Molecular Hydrogen Institute, which is run by Dr. Tyler LeBaron, PhD, the voice of molecular hydrogen for the world. And I want to spend a few minutes today talking to you about molecular hydrogen's realities more than its possibilities. By the time we finish, you're going to know why scientists are calling this a miracle molecule. In fact, you're probably going to know more than most people in the US do, still likely less than what folk in other countries know, where they teach molecular hydrogen courses in their major universities. So, who am I? I spent 40 years in tech, more than half that time working for Dell during that company's meteoric rise to fame. When I joined in 1995, there were 5,000 employees there. 22 years later, I left to support FusionStorm as the director of their Dell relationship, and Dell had grown to 138,000 employees. While there, I was always at the forefront of technology. It was just more fun, and it was always more profitable. I joined the first team supporting the internet when Dell was trying to figure out if the internet could even make them any money. As the internet revolution gathered momentum, I joined the TSR organization. That was a group of more technical sales reps who were Dell's trusted advisors for servers, storage, and networking. A few years into that role, Dell asked me if I'd like to help open up their partner division. Back then, resellers called Dell the devil because we sold direct to consumers, often undercutting their prices. To illustrate how deep their animosity ran, my first month there, supporting every partner in the US, I sold a total of 4 servers. 10 years later, I supported one partner, Readout. My last month there, my quota was $50 million. We were busy building out the Uber network and did more like 250 million. Along the way, I earned 5 Circle of Excellence trips, received TSR of the Year twice, and had my proudest moment when, with what I used to call my A team, we won Sales Team of the Year supporting Readout. When FusionStorm sold to a European entity, I retired early at 61 to pursue my first love, which is writing. I left Dell with a pocket full of good stories and told those in my very first book, Riding on the Coattails of Genius. Then I went on to write a supernatural series called The Celestial Wars with really good guys and really bad guys that were just a lot of fun to write. I'm finishing up my last book in the series now, and I'm going to have to admit, I'm really going to miss that universe. I thought I was going to spend the rest of my life writing. But about 5 years ago, my daughter, Mary Rose, joined a 50-year-old organization selling a full fledged medical device that was doing a lot of people a lot of good health wise. That company was Enagic, and that device was the Kangen K8. She told me the testimonials were pretty miraculous. She loved selling the product because it helped people consume better quality water, but she didn't understand how it worked. And she wondered, since I was technical, could I help? Of course, I dove right in. I quickly moved beyond Google to focus on molecular hydrogen studies on Google Scholar and PubMed. After 3 days, I dug through pretty much everything available, which was about 100 studies back then, told Mary Rose it was all about the molecular hydrogen, and bought a K8 for myself. I lost 40 pounds and spent the next few years walking the golf course where previously I'd been riding. Loved the water, drank it every day, but honestly, I was so busy writing and helping my son with his business that I enjoyed her stories of success at Magic when she was very successful there, but I didn't think too much more about the machine until after I moved to Colorado Springs. Mary Rose came to visit and sold our next door neighbor a K8. I figured it was about time to bone up on the science at that point. And what I found out was that during the few years I was away from it, that 100 studies had become 3,500 studies. And scientists had begun calling it the miracle molecule. That's about the time that I found Tyler LeBaron, the voice of molecular hydrogen, joined the nonprofit that he created to get the word out, and spent the next 6 months studying for first my advisor, then my consultant certification. Molecular hydrogen, or H2, may be the smallest, lightest molecule in the universe, but it's by no means the simplest. And the science, even though it's new, that studies molecular hydrogen is deep and wide. Becoming the Miracle Molecule mentor myself required attending college level classes, doing the homework, then getting tested on a wide variety of questions designed to cover basic science as well as molecular hydrogen and chemistry in general. Hey, and if this picture here looks better than my little talking head, all I can say is thank God for the power of AI. One of the first things I used my new knowledge for was to create a Facebook group, which of course was titled Miracle Molecule Mentor. Now, I used to write a newsletter for Dell called Servers Are Easy. It went worldwide and won multiple awards. And so I used that same format for my Facebook group, which was keep it short and keep it simple. One of those posts is the Alzheimer's study that I'm showing here. That study was filled with complicated scientific jargon written by scientists for scientists that after wading through the whole report, which was 4 or 5 hours to get through, I found one graphic that did an excellent job of summarizing the results. They had three groups of mice. First one was a control group. They didn't have Alzheimer's. The second one was a control group with Alzheimer's that was fed tap water. The third group had Alzheimer's and was fed hydrogen-rich water. After 7 months of running them through the same maze, you can see the WT or the non-Alzheimer's control group went straight to the food. The second group with Alzheimer's that was fed tap water, it looks like a child's crayon scroll. They had them and lost going through a maze. I think they just found the food by accident. The third group, only difference instead of tap water, they were fed hydrogen-rich water, went through the maze, and still made a mistake. I mean, they had Alzheimer's, but look at how much better their minds were functioning. One mistake and right to the food. To me, that illustrates beautifully the value of molecular hydrogen for keeping your body healthy, no matter what you're dealing with. I don't care if it's cancers or tumors or Alzheimer's. Molecular hydrogen just does a better job of helping you stay young and healthy. We're going to talk more about that. Now, you can call it coincidence or divine timing, but about the time that I was up to speed on molecular hydrogen, I contracted an RSV virus here in the Springs. It took me down for 2 weeks. And at one point, I was so bad off, I was rolled into the emergency room in a wheelchair. The virus scarred up 1/3 of my lungs, left me with 67% of my lungs left. And there was no way to breathe properly at that point. I ended up sitting on the couch. And when I had to clean the kitchen, I did it in stages, dealt with horrible coughing fits all day, every day. In fact, I couldn't take a full breath without coughing. Coughing fits got so bad that they almost sent me to the emergency room twice, in fact. Multiple CAT scans and numerous other tests later, my pulmonary specialist's final prognosis was there's no way to heal scarred lungs. My job is to keep you off oxygen for as long as I can, but one day you're going to be dependent on keeping a tank next to you to breathe. So that time was just an emotional roller coaster. But everything that I'd learned from the months that I spent studying molecular hydrogen on PubMed, all the science that I absorbed from the Molecular Hydrogen Institute, and Dr. LeBaron's own comprehensive study covering lung diseases and molecular hydrogen encouraged me to create a treatment regimen for myself based on molecular hydrogen. So I developed what I like to call a saturation protocol. 1 hour every morning bathing in saturation level molecular hydrogen water, then pour and drink hydrogen-rich water from my trusty K8 throughout the day, 100 ounces minimum. Then sit myself on my couch and inhale molecular hydrogen all day, every day. I bought a laptop so I could keep working, but I figured my real job was to get better. It was just a little over 3 weeks later, on April 6th to be exact, after months of having every breath be a struggle, that I could suddenly breathe easy again. I haven't had another coughing fit since. I still use a light version of my saturation protocol, and I've gone from being housebound to walking partway around the block to going around the entire block without stopping to, going through my day, going to Costco to the shop, going up and down stairs, never worrying about losing my breath. And that's 180 degrees from where it was. Now I continue to improve. And if you're wondering about the photo of that bike in the middle of the slide, that's my 100th anniversary edition BMW R18. It's an 850-pound monster of a machine. I hadn't been on that bike in months. I'm finally back to riding it comfortably. And once I get back to walking the golf course, I'm going to consider myself completely healed. I have another CAT scan coming up in a couple of months, but my specialist said, hey, it's really about how you feel. And I feel 10,000% better than I did just a few months ago. Now, I know a testimonial from my studies at the Institute is the weakest form of scientific evidence, but I want you to consider that my pulmonary specialist told me that there was no way to be healed from scarred up lungs. It was something I was going to live with for the rest of my life. I pumped my body full of saturation levels of molecular hydrogen all day, every day, and 3 weeks later, I could breathe again. And that's just how fast molecular hydrogen works. You're welcome to ask me more about it, but you see testimonials, at least I see them all the time, and it never takes very long for molecular hydrogen to do its job. So I've talked about my training and what molecular hydrogen did for me personally. Now I want to focus on the bigger picture because molecular hydrogen has been around since the beginning of the universe. It was there at the creation of life on Earth and the creation of complex life on Earth. It now exists in every creature on this planet with a stomach, helping immune systems maintain homeostasis or balance, which is the secret of all good health. After I do this bigger picture, we're going to cover the realities of molecular hydrogen around the world because America is definitely behind the health curve and for particular reasons. Then we're going to wrap up with how molecular hydrogen works in your body, which will tell you why scientists are calling it the miracle molecule. Yeah, not my term, but a consensus by the molecular hydrogen science community in Japan. That's an entire group of scientists who've also been heard to say you need oxygen to live, but you need molecular hydrogen to live well. How deeply is molecular hydrogen intertwined with the universe, life, and everything? The James Webb Telescope launched into deep space in December of 2021. It was designed to peer back to the beginnings of the universe, and what it saw blew up the Big Bang. Way back when the cosmos was supposed to be a big ball of dark gas, James Webb found massive, well formed galaxies filled with heavy metals already operating at the level of our supposedly far more mature Milky Way. That shouldn't have been possible, not without generations of supernovas spanning billions, not a few hundred million years. The proposed Jahn-Teller pathway applies the fundamental quantum chemistry rule to show how neutral atomic hydrogen and protons rapidly synthesize to molecular hydrogen and hydrogen deuteride. By bypassing the cosmic microwave background radiation bottleneck, this mechanism enabled early gas clouds to cool and collapse much faster than the standard models had predicted, providing a really compelling explanation for a mature galaxy that existed 13 billion years ago in what was supposed to be a dark universe. Okay, picture two primitive microbes living in a harsh ancient ocean billions of years ago before the Earth even had oxygen. The first one is the host, a simple microbe with long, flexible arm like extensions called blebs. The second was a small hydrogen dependent bacterium floating in the vicinity. Instead of fighting, they started trading. The host released waste that the guest needed, and the guest released hydrogen that fed the host. To get as close as possible and trade efficiently, the host wrapped its blebs around the guest. Over time, those arms fused together completely, trapping the guest inside the host body. The guest didn't die. It became a permanent internal roommate, an endosymbiont. Before this partnership, the host was very limited because it had to run its entire power plant along its outer skin just to survive. Once the guest was trapped inside, it took over power production for the cell, eventually evolving into what we call the mitochondria, the power plant of all of our cells. By letting its new internal roommate handle energy production, the host's outer skin was freed up to do other jobs like building an internal organization system, nucleus, and organelles, and taking in larger food particles. That ancient hydrogen fuel partnership created the very first complex cell, making it the ultimate ancestor of all plants, animals, fungi, and humans on Earth today. So let's look at these last couple of slides in terms of molecular hydrogen's bigger picture. The pattern that emerges is really interesting. In the early universe, H2 dissipated excess thermal energy so that gravity could construct organized structures, i.e., stars, galaxies, and solar systems. In the first and simplest forms of life, molecular hydrogen used our mitochondrial ancestors to create a power source for more complex cellular structures, which is the basis for all evolution since. And today, in human physiology, H2 dissipates excess oxidative stress and calms hyperactive immune responses, preserving the structural integrity of our more complex multicellular life. At every stage of existence, molecular hydrogen acts as a stabilizing force. It enables systems, whether a collapsing gas cloud, an origin of life protocell, or a human immune system fighting systemic inflammation, to manage energy and entropy without destroying themselves. In the presence of molecular hydrogen, the presence of molecular hydrogen in modern therapeutic science is not a novel invention. It is a return to the very molecule that made life possible in the first place. In fact, Dr. LeBaron predicts that molecular hydrogen will be a foundation of modern medicine by 2035. Yeah, molecular hydrogen's bigger picture is kind of mind-blowing, but its scientific proofs are equally uniquely compelling. When evaluating molecular hydrogen, we aren't looking at a complex synthetic pharmaceutical, but a simple, highly permeable biological modulator capable of selectively targeting cytotoxic radicals and dampening inflation. H2 is a natural gas. It can't be patented, and it lacks the multi-billion-dollar incentive for big pharma to fund massive phase 3 clinical trials, which is what's needed here in the United States to get FDA approval. This has put us behind not the healthcare revolution going on around the rest of the world, but its evolution. The scientific foundation's not missing, it's just structured differently than what we recognize here in the US. Instead of one giant corporate trial, we have a vast body of individual laboratory evidential proofs, thousands of peer-reviewed studies that point in the same positive direction for virtually every system in our bodies. Even Dr. Otto, the scientist who discovered the therapeutic value of molecular hydrogen in 2007, acknowledges the value of this kind of proof. If we borrow a preponderance of evidence framework from the legal world, the question becomes, is it more likely than not that molecular hydrogen offers physiological benefits? Given its pristine safety profile, its zero toxicity, and its overwhelming indicative data, waiting for corporate-oriented big pharma proofs that aren't coming shouldn't stop Americans from actually informing themselves carefully, then making proactive health choices that work for their own lives. Now I want to explore the realities of molecular hydrogen around the world, mainly because molecular hydrogen is far more advanced in most other countries. In fact, I believe in every other country it's more advanced just because of the way our system's set up here. The obvious starting point is Japan. There was a 2007 Nature Medicine study by Dr. Shigeo Ota that got this whole thing started. He and his team tested molecular hydrogen on a mouse model of acute stroke. They induced ischemia or heart attack by temporarily blocking the cerebral artery in the rodents, cutting off the blood flow to a large portion of the brain for about 90 minutes before restoring it. When the lab animals inhaled low concentrations of H2 during and after this process, the total volume of dead brain tissue was roughly cut in half, with the mice retaining motor function, reflex responses, and limb coordination far better than the control group. The Japanese government logically followed this up with a clinical trial that ended up being a landmark trial evaluating survival rates of heart attack victims across 15 different medical centers in Japan. There was a hydrogen control group and an oxygen, standard oxygen control group. The hydrogen inhalation group, their survival rate was 85%. The control group, or the oxygen group, their survival rate was 61%. Now, beyond overall survival, the study also measured survival without brain damage. H2 group, almost half, 46%. The control group, 1 in 5 or 21% avoided brain damage. Bottom line, 24 more people out of every 100 who had a heart attack during this study survived their ambulance ride to the hospital in Japan. And 50% more of those didn't sustain any neurological damage, all because they inhaled a simple molecule. Stroke. And let's not leave out the rest of the world. In Germany and the Czech Republic, there's clinics that feed patients molecular hydrogen and record measurable, lasting Alzheimer's cognitive score improvements. In Russia, the government actually funds clinical research and sanctions the H2 therapy programs. And in India, researchers and integrative clinics are focusing heavily on chronic oxidative stress conditions, specifically metabolic syndrome, type 2 diabetes, and chronic inflammatory disorders, offering low-cost, zero-toxicity H2 inhalation and hydrogen-rich water as non-invasive adjunctive therapies. Bottom line, while Western medicine waits for non-existent big pharma trials to happen, global clinical centers are actively leveraging molecular hydrogen as an accessible, high safety, and systemic intervention with measurable human outcomes. So we may not be getting it here yet as consumers in general, but I guarantee you America's wealthiest aren't waiting on science. Bill Gates, I believe, actually has 16 Kangen machines in his mansion. Well-known sports figures, such as Tiger Woods, are using it, and teams like the Lakers and the Angels put Kangen water machines in their locker rooms. Our national alpine ski team uses this. In fact, I think almost every pro football team out there has an Enagic K8 in their team room. That's because they can get the best. And that's the same hydrogen water generator that we're going to talk about and that I have in my home that helped heal my scarred up lungs. So I'm sharing this slide for a very good reason. This is a new discovery. Dr. Otah himself, the guy who discovered the value of molecular hydrogen, was doing a study with a professional soccer team, and it was a very well-controlled study. One of the things he found was the age 25 biochemical threshold, which we're going to talk about now. Here are some of the conditions that Dr. Otah put in place to guarantee the effectiveness of his study. One, ice cold water was used to try to keep the molecular hydrogen from escaping so fast. Two, a 15-minute rule was in place so that if you broke the package that the molecular hydrogen water was in, you had to drink it immediately before the gas escaped from the package. The good thought was that they could, because there's zero toxicity, they could feed them as much water as they needed to find what the optimal dose was for their athletes to help them both perform better and to recover faster. So here's the numbers. And bottom line, they had to use almost twice as much molecular hydrogen water to get similar performance enhancements and similar relief from muscle pain for players over 25 as for their counterparts who were under 25. So they found that 25 is the biochemical threshold where your body evidently is not making molecular hydrogen so much anymore, and you have to supplement it with more molecular hydrogen to get the same effect as when you're younger. Okay, let's dig into exactly what molecular hydrogen does in your body. It's a new science, but they already know some things. In fact, almost as revolutionary as Dr. Otah's 2007 study, at the end of last year, Dr. LeBaron, my teacher, co-authored another study published in Redox Biology that identified the risky iron sulfur protein in mitochondrial complex 3 as a primary target of molecular hydrogen. So here's how it works. Mitochondria takes the food you eat and the oxygen you breathe and manufactures ATP, the chemical currency that your body uses for everything from muscle contractions to thinking. However, making ATP is a dirty job. Mitochondria are also the single biggest source of cellular waste and damage in your body. Molecular hydrogen in phase one goes in and stresses the mitochondria just enough to set off their internal alarms, which in phase two trigger their defense mechanisms, which in phase three create, there's trillions of mitochondria in your body, and this creates a whole slew of new mitochondria to keep that whole process running as smoothly and as efficiently as possible with less toxic byproducts. It's not that molecular hydrogen is healing anything directly. It's been evolved to work similar to exercise, which stresses your muscles to make them stronger and more robust. Molecular hydrogen, they found, stresses your mitochondria to make them stronger and more robust. I also want to mention antioxidants and molecular hydrogen because they're such a buzzword. So antioxidants fight ROS, reactive oxygen species, or rust, basically, that's aging your body. But your body actually needs some of those ROS, such as hydrogen peroxide, to work as internal signaling molecules to help build your immunities and let you adapt to the real world. Molecular hydrogen is more like a surgical antioxidant, ignoring beneficial ROS, exclusively targeting and neutralizing the body's two most destructive cellular assassins, hydroxyl radicals and peroxynitrate, converting both safely into H2O or water. While mitochondria and antioxidants are good examples of why molecular hydrogen is called a miracle molecule by the scientists, it has many other roles that keep your cellular engine running at peak efficiency. For one, molecular hydrogen is a highly sophisticated traffic controller. In acute emergencies, it acts as a cellular braking system. When your immune system panics and triggers a devastating cytokine storm, that's where hyperactive white blood cells inadvertently destroy healthy tissue while trying to fight off an injury or a virus. Molecular hydrogen swoops in to shut down the two major cellular alarm switches, mTOR, which drives runaway inflammation, and the NLRP3 inflammasome, a tripwire that triggers severe tissue swelling. By quieting these triggers, H2 flips your immune cells, your macrophages, out of their aggressive attack mode and directly into a healing cleanup mode, causing a rapid decline in circulating inflammatory chemicals. For chronic conditions, H2 transitions from slamming on the brakes to training your cells to defend themselves, activating NRF2, a master genetic switch that commands cells to mass produce antioxidant enzymes. Also, with chronic stress, your cells tend to get clogged with misfolded non-functional proteins. Molecular hydrogen dampens cellular stress signaling to help your cells keep producing clean, functional proteins. Evolution has found so many uses for this singular molecule over millions of years, it even breaks through traditional rules of biochemistry, easily bypassing the ultra-strict blood-brain barrier that blocks most medicines and toxins so it can interact directly with brain cells in seconds to cool down neural inflammation. Most of what's going on is not theoretical with molecular hydrogen, it's measurable, and that's where all the studies come in. For example, human clinical trials show that drinking hydrogen-rich water for as little as 4 weeks significantly decreases cellular damage markers, increases protective blood factors, and actively restores blood oxygen saturation. I want to mention that while undergoing my own molecular hydrogen therapy, I wore a blood ox meter on my finger, and I watched that oxygen saturation in my blood climb from the compromised mid 80s back to the mid 90s in just a few weeks, which is, pretty normal. I think mid 90s is normal for the high altitude that I live in. If that's not enough jobs for one simple little molecule, I also want to mention molecular hydrogen is the most compelling, truly adaptogenic molecule in existence. By definition, an adaptogen must upregulate what is deficient and downregulate what is overactive. Again, balance. The most important thing in all is the healthy balance. If a tissue is undergoing severe oxidative stress, H2 activates protective and restorative pathways. If the tissue is already in homeostasis, it remains completely, safely inert. I remember reading about one controlled laboratory study where healthy cells were surrounded by molecular hydrogen. The molecule remained quiescent until the scientists damaged the cell. Then it stepped in to repair the cellular damage before returning to its quiet protective standby mode. For my last slide, I want to share someone else's testimonial. So, because I'm involved in molecular hydrogen all day, every day, I see these every day. But this particular testimonial resonated with me because my dad was a world champion volleyballer. It was published in the January 2023 issue of Volleyball Magazine. It's about Jen Keddy, who's a 6'4" tall pro volleyball player. She was playing in Germany when her stomach began to distend. She thought she was pregnant. When she went to see the doctor, the ultrasound image that appeared on the screen wasn't a baby. It was a tumor the size of a football. Jen Keddy had stage 4 ovarian cancer. 3 days later, she's on a flight home to California, and on Christmas Eve, flew into Missoula. On Christmas Day, she and her mother drove 5 hours to see a specialist in Billings who scheduled emergency surgery. And by 3 o'clock the next morning, the tumor was successfully removed. But stage 4 means the cancer itself had already spread through her body. A lifelong athlete and a young one at that, Jen was strong enough for doctors to recommend the most aggressive regimen of chemotherapy. It had her in the hospital for 6 hours a day, nearly every day, for 5 whole months, as a cancer killing poison was injected into her veins via a port in her chest. Soon, Jen had to watch her feet because she couldn't feel them anymore, and so she had to be careful when she walked. She was racked by terrible headaches and as bald as the baby she once thought she was having. Once that super aggressive round of treatments was done, Jen, believe it or not, wanted to return to volleyball. When she told her doctor that, he said it was possible, but she was going to have to be on medicine for the rest of her life. Jen thought, I'm 26 years old. There's no way I'm doing that. Her options, according to her doctor, were two. It was either medicine or a miracle. Jen went looking for alternatives, and within a week, she'd found her miracle. She came across a social media post from a friend of hers whose dad had been diagnosed with cancer and, like Keddy, was going through chemotherapy. But he'd learned about something called Kangen water, a product of Enagic International. She decided that compared to the potential benefit, the cost was inconsequential, bought a K8, and within 1 week, the side effects of her chemotherapy had begun to disappear. Her headaches faded, her numb feet were replaced with the sublime sensation of being able to feel herself wiggling her toes, and she went back to volleyball. Within a few years, she was the ATP champion pictured here. So amazing story, but one of literally hundreds or thousands that I've seen, and that's molecular hydrogen for you. I hope that you've enjoyed this presentation. I know that some Americans who are new to this are going to see this as a miracle cure. Others are going to see it as a fountain of youth. It's not either. It's just nature using the multi-million year mechanisms of evolution. So my information is miraclemoleculementor.com. From there, you can get to my Facebook pages where I continue to post about the science all the time. If you have questions, please don't hesitate. That's my life for the rest of my life is advocating and informing people about molecular hydrogen. Now, if you will follow the link that's on this same video, you can find out more about the K8 and the opportunities surrounding it. Enagic has made my daughter hundreds of thousands of dollars, and it's made bunches of other people millions of dollars, and it saved my life with her question, that one question, Dad, you're technical. Can you help me understand?